5 signs a woman's gut feeling is right about his lies. A woman's intuition is one of the most powerful forces on earth. Quiet, ancient, and rarely wrong. Long before the truth ever shows itself, she feels it. Her energy shifts before her mind can explain why. Something inside her just knows when his words don't match his vibration. He can say all the right things, look her in the eyes, and smile like everything's fine, but her body feels the static. Her heart tightens, her mood changes, and the air between them becomes heavier. That's not insecurity, that's intuition whispering the truth. When his story sounds right but feels wrong, that's the second sign. There's a tone in his voice, a rhythm in his excuses, that doesn't align with what she knows in her soul. She might try to brush it off, convincing herself she's imagining things, but the feeling doesn't fade. It lingers, quietly insisting that something about his story doesn't fit. Then comes the third sign. She starts over-explaining herself. She finds herself talking in circles, trying to justify why she feels uneasy, hoping he'll understand. But deep down, she knows she's only doing that because she's not being believed. A woman's intuition doesn't need to argue. But when she's in the presence of someone who constantly invalidates her, she begins to question herself instead of the lie. That's what emotional manipulation does. It teaches her to distrust her own truth, but her gut keeps speaking, even when she tries to silence it. The fourth sign is when her peace disappears, even in his arms. She might still love him, still want to believe in him, but something inside her doesn't rest. Her nervous system senses the danger her heart is trying to deny. She can't relax, can't feel fully present, and no amount of affection can mask that inner tension. That's when she realizes that love without honesty doesn't feel like safety. It feels like survival. She's not paranoid, she's protective. Her body knows she's standing next to someone who's not being fully real. And then, the final sign, the moment when the truth finally arrives. It always does, just later than she wished. A text, a message, a slip of the tongue, or an inconsistency too big to ignore. Suddenly, everything clicks. All the doubts, the strange moments, the quiet unease. They all make sense. And she realizes her gut wasn't warning her to fear him, but to see him. It wasn't trying to destroy the relationship. It was trying to protect her from the illusion. That's the painful beauty of a woman's intuition. It doesn't scream, it reveals. And when it's right, it doesn't need evidence to prove itself, because the truth has a frequency, and her spirit has always been tuned to it. In the end, when a woman listens to her gut, she stops chasing closure from liars. She stops explaining her emotions to those who only hear convenience, not truth. She learns that intuition isn't a weakness or a wound. It's her greatest armor. It's the sacred voice inside her that's been right all along, waiting for her to trust it again. When a woman's intuition speaks louder than his lies, a woman's intuition is not a guess. It's ancient wisdom passed down through generations, built from energy, emotion, and silent observation. It's the quiet voice that speaks before reason, before logic, before she even knows why she feels what she feels. When a woman's gut starts whispering that something is wrong, she's not imagining it. She's sensing truth that her mind hasn't yet processed. Her body reacts before her brain catches up, her energy feels off, and her peace disappears in places that once felt like home. That shift is the first sign. Her entire being becomes alert, not out of fear, but from recognition. She knows something isn't right, even when everything looks perfect on the surface. It's as if her soul catches a signal that the physical world hasn't yet revealed. She listens to his words, but her spirit hears the silence between them. That's where truth hides, not in what he says, but in what he avoids saying. His story might sound flawless, yet something in the tone, the pauses, or the lack of emotion feels hollow. Her gut begins to stir, quietly asking, why does this sound right but feel wrong? It's not about proof, it's about resonance. Truth has a frequency, and when a man speaks it, her heart feels calm. But when he lies, the energy shifts. She feels it like a sudden chill, an invisible wall between them. She can't explain it logically, but deep down, she already knows she's being deceived. Then comes the confusion. She starts to question herself because he's so convincing. He may call her dramatic, overly emotional, or insecure, and for a moment, she wonders if he's right. But that's where manipulation lives. In the space between what she feels and what he wants her to believe, she begins to overthink every detail, every conversation, and every action. She starts defending her emotions, explaining her suspicions, and trying to prove her intuition. But the truth is, intuition doesn't need evidence. It just is. It's not paranoia, it's perception. The more she tries to justify it, the more she realizes she's not fighting for the truth. She's fighting to be believed. That's when her peace starts fading. She can't sleep the same, can't laugh the same, can't fully relax around him. Even in his presence, something feels off, as if the warmth between them has turned into a quiet storm. She used to feel grounded in his arms, now she feels restless, watching for subtle signs, listening for inconsistencies. She can't explain why her stomach knots up when he picks up his phone, or why her chest tightens when he avoids eye contact. Her body is speaking louder than his words. It's not about jealousy or control. It's about safety. She's feeling what her heart already knows. She's loving someone who's not being honest. And then, as always, the truth reveals itself. It could be a small mistake, a message he forgot to delete, a detail that doesn't match, or a confession that slips out in anger. Whatever form it takes, it always arrives, because truth cannot stay buried forever. When it does, everything she felt begins to make sense. The late night unease, the subtle changes, the heavy silences, all of it clicks together. She realizes her gut wasn't trying to ruin her relationship, it was trying to protect her. It wasn't screaming for proof, it was whispering for peace. And even though the revelation hurts, it also frees her. Because the moment she sees the truth, she stops doubting herself. She understands that her intuition was never wrong, she just ignored it for the sake of love. In that moment, something powerful happens. She reclaims her voice. She learns that intuition is not an enemy of logic, it's the part of her that sees what logic cannot. It's her body's wisdom, her emotional intelligence, her spiritual radar. When she starts trusting it, she no longer explains her feelings to those who twist them. She no longer apologizes for being too sensitive. She realizes that sensitivity is not weakness, it's awareness. It's the gift of seeing beneath the mask, of feeling truth through vibration, of sensing energy long before it's visible. A woman's gut feeling is not a myth. It's her protection system. It's the echo of her ancestors who survived by reading energy instead of words. It's her natural instinct to detect deception and shield her peace. And once she starts honoring it, she becomes unstoppable. Because the woman who listens to her intuition no longer needs closure, she already knows. She no longer needs proof. She feels truth. And she no longer needs validation. Her own spirit becomes her confirmation. So when her gut speaks, she listens. She no longer silences it for love, for approval, or for comfort. She understands that a peaceful heart is better than a convincing lie. Because at the end of the day, intuition is love's way of protecting her before pain ever gets the chance to reach her. The woman who trusts her gut stops being fooled, not because she knows everything, but because she knows herself. And that self-knowing becomes her greatest form of power, quiet, unwavering, and always right. When his words don't match his energy, the truth a woman always feels first. There comes a moment in every woman's life when she realizes that words are cheap, but energy never lies. A man can tell her he loves her every single day, but if his presence doesn't feel like safety, if his eyes shift when he speaks, or if his actions contradict his promises, her soul begins to withdraw. That's the moment her intuition starts whispering. It doesn't shout or accuse. It simply nudges her heart with a quiet knowing something isn't real here. And though she might not have proof, her body feels the truth before her mind can make sense of it. His words might sound sweet, but they don't settle in her spirit. They float, they echo, but they never land, because truth has a frequency. And lies, no matter how poetic, carry static. At first, she questions herself. She wonders if she's overreacting, if maybe she's too emotional, too sensitive, or expecting too much. But deep down, she knows what she feels. She remembers how peace used to feel around him. Effortless, light, calm. Now, there's tension where there used to be ease. His laughter feels hollow. His touch feels rehearsed, and his stories begin to sound like a script she's heard before. She notices how he changes the subject when she gets close to the truth, how his tone becomes defensive, how he avoids eye contact when the questions get real. And though he may be skilled with words, her spirit is fluent in energy. It's like her heart speaks a language his lies can't fake. Her intuition doesn't need evidence, it recognizes patterns. She's seen this dance before. The charm that fades when comfort settles, the attention that becomes distance, the promises that evaporate once she trusts. She starts feeling emotionally invisible, like she's in love alone. He still says all the right things, but his energy no longer holds her like it used to. It's in the way he hugs her without warmth, kisses her without depth, listens without presence. And that's the paradox. He's still there, but she can feel the absence in his presence. That's the energy she can't explain, but can't ignore either. It's the unspoken truth that her soul keeps pointing toward. The hardest part is not the lie itself, it's pretending not to feel it. She stays, hoping maybe she's wrong, hoping he'll shift back into the man he once was. She silences her intuition for the sake of the relationship, convincing herself that every love has rough patches, that maybe he's just stressed, maybe she's just tired. But every time she ignores that inner voice, she loses a little more of herself. Her smile fades, her energy dulls, her heart grows heavy. Because the truth is, pretending not to know drains a woman faster than heartbreak ever could. Her intuition keeps whispering, keeps pulling her back toward reality, asking her to stop explaining the unease and start trusting it. And one day, something small confirms it. It's never dramatic. Maybe a text, a tone, a detail that doesn't fit. Suddenly, all the little pieces align, and everything she felt becomes visible. That's the painful validation. Her gut was right all along. The proof she once begged for now stings, because it makes her realize she already knew. She knew when he started hiding his phone. She knew when his attention wandered mid-conversation. She knew when affection turned into obligation. Her body never lied to her. She just kept believing him over herself. But once truth arrives, she can't unsee it. And in that moment, she doesn't explode or beg for answers. She just goes quiet, because peace always follows truth. That's when her power returns. She remembers that her intuition isn't a flaw, it's her shield. It's her inner compass that keeps her aligned with honesty, even when love tries to blind her. She understands that energy doesn't lie, it reveals. When a man's words and energy don't align, her gut is her translator. It reads between his lines. It senses his hesitation. It catches what his mouth tries to disguise. And when she starts listening to that inner voice, she stops needing closure from anyone. She becomes her own truth teller, her own healer, her own protector. The woman who trusts her intuition doesn't become bitter. She becomes wise. She learns to watch less and feel more. She doesn't chase words anymore. She studies energy. She pays attention to how she feels when someone walks into the room. Does her spirit relax, or does it tighten? Does her mind calm, or does it race? Those feelings are sacred messages, not from fear, but from divine awareness. She realizes that when something feels wrong, it's because it is. No explanation needed. So she stops doubting the quiet signals that saved her time and time again. She stops calling her intuition paranoia. She understands that her sensitivity is her superpower, her inner radar that detects dishonesty before it becomes destruction. Because when a woman learns to trust that feeling, that subtle, undeniable sense of knowing, she becomes untouchable. She no longer falls for charm. She reads integrity. She no longer needs to hear, "I love you." To feel loved, she watches how love is shown. At the end of it all, she realizes this. A man's words may confuse her, but his energy never will. And once a woman learns to trust that, to listen not to what he says, but to what her soul feels, she will never be lied to again. Because her intuition doesn't just protect her from deceit, it guides her back to herself. And that, above all, is the most honest love she'll ever find. The silent battle of a woman who feels his distance before he admits it. There's a silence that speaks louder than any argument. The one a woman feels when the man she loves begins to drift away. It's not sudden, not obvious at first. It starts quietly, like the warmth leaving a room, like laughter fading in the background. He's still there physically, but emotionally, she feels him slipping through her fingers. His hugs lose their depth, his words lose their warmth, and his eyes, the ones that used to hold her soul, start looking elsewhere. She can't explain it to anyone, because there's no clear evidence. But deep down, her gut knows. Something is off. Something sacred between them has shifted, and while he might pretend everything's fine, her intuition refuses to be fooled. She feels his absence in the smallest things. The good morning texts become shorter, the calls less frequent, and the conversations that once flowed effortlessly now feel forced. He laughs, but it doesn't sound the same. He touches her, but it feels different. She tries to ignore it, tries to tell herself she's imagining it, but her heart aches in ways logic can't soothe. The truth is, women don't just feel love, they feel energy. And when that energy changes, they feel the loss before the goodbye is even spoken. Her gut starts whispering before her mind dares to admit it. She's leaving, even if he hasn't said it yet. The hardest part isn't losing him. It's watching him stay while his soul has already gone. She notices how he's become emotionally unavailable, how he withdraws into silence when she tries to connect. He used to ask how her day was, used to look at her like she was the center of his world. Now, his attention is scattered, his response is shallow. And yet, he still insists that everything's fine. But a woman's intuition doesn't believe words, it believes energy. She feels the emotional distance like a wound that never stops stinging. She can sense when his love is no longer pure, when he's forcing what used to flow naturally. And though he may not admit it, his silence confirms everything her gut has already known. Still, she tries to hold on. She gives more, loves harder, hoping maybe she can bring him back with kindness. She listens, she forgives, she excuses. Because that's what love does. But no amount of softness can revive what has already died. Her soul feels exhausted from pretending, her heart heavy from carrying both sides of the relationship. That's the cruel reality of emotional distance. It doesn't break loudly, it fades quietly. She's loving someone who's already halfway out the door, and yet she's the one left trying to fix the cracks. But how do you fix something that the other person has already stopped holding? She starts losing herself in the process. Her laughter dims, her energy drops, and her once vibrant spirit turns anxious and restless. She can't understand why she feels so unseen by someone who once claimed to love her deeply. She wonders if she did something wrong, if she said something that pushed him away. But the truth is, his distance has nothing to do with her worth. A woman's intuition doesn't lie, it only reveals. It shows her what her heart has been denying. He's not the same anymore. And sometimes, love changes quietly, not because of betrayal, but because connection demands truth, and truth is something not everyone can handle. When she finally accepts what she feels, there's a moment of painful clarity. She realizes that her gut had been warning her for weeks, maybe months. Every uneasy night, every forced smile, every time she felt alone next to him, it was her intuition speaking. It wasn't paranoia, it was protection. Her soul was trying to prepare her for the truth she didn't want to face. And when she finally listens, everything clicks into place. She stops chasing the version of him that no longer exists. She stops trying to resuscitate a love that's already taken its last breath. Instead, she starts reclaiming herself, her peace, her confidence, her energy. That's when her power returns. Because when a woman listens to her intuition, she stops needing anyone to validate her feelings. She stops explaining why something feels wrong and starts trusting that if her soul says it's off, it is. She learns that love should feel like home, not confusion, not guessing, not pain. And if she has to beg for attention or fight for presence, that's not love, that's survival. So she chooses herself, quietly, gracefully, powerfully. She lets go, not out of anger, but out of truth. Because holding on to someone who's emotionally gone is more painful than being alone. In time, she finds peace again, the storm settles, and what once broke her becomes her lesson. She understands that her intuition is not a burden. It's her guide, her guardian. It will always tell her the truth, even when her heart doesn't want to hear it. And though it hurt to feel his distance before he admitted it, it also freed her from waiting for closure he was never going to give. She learns to trust the invisible. The shift in energy, the silence between words, the heaviness in the air, because those are the signs that reveal more than any confession ever could. A woman's intuition is her sacred power, the voice that speaks before betrayal, before heartbreak, before endings. It is her inner wisdom reminding her that what she feels is real, that energy never lies, and that her peace is worth protecting. When she listens to it, she no longer clings to half love or empty words. She becomes whole again, not because he stayed, but because she finally chose to believe herself. When a woman stops explaining herself, her silence becomes her power. There comes a point in every woman's life when she grows tired, not just physically, but emotionally, tired of over-explaining, tired of defending her feelings, tired of being made to feel crazy for simply sensing the truth. She realizes that no matter how many times she explains her heart, the wrong people will never understand. They don't hear her emotions, they hear what threatens their comfort. And that's when something powerful happens. She goes quiet, not out of defeat, but out of awakening. Her silence isn't weakness, it's strength that no longer seeks validation. It's the sound of a woman finally choosing her peace over the need to be understood. For years, she may have explained her emotions to people who never intended to listen. She tried to justify her boundaries, her intuition, her decisions, hoping that if she said it kindly enough, patiently enough, they would finally see her side. But they never did. They twisted her words, called her dramatic, or accused her of being too sensitive. And each time she tried to prove her worth through explanation, she unknowingly gave her power away. Because explaining yourself to people who are committed to misunderstanding you is like arguing with an echo. No matter what you say, it only bounces back distorted. The turning point comes when she realizes she doesn't owe anyone an explanation for protecting her peace. She doesn't owe clarity to someone who constantly confuses her, or closure to someone who shattered her trust. She doesn't owe softness to someone who mistook her empathy for weakness. The moment she accepts that silence is not avoidance but self-respect, she steps into a higher version of herself. She no longer reacts to every provocation or defends every decision. She learns that true confidence isn't in convincing others, it's in knowing that she doesn't have to. Her silence becomes her boundary. It's how she says, "I see your games, but I no longer play." It's how she says, "I love myself too much to argue about what I already know." Her silence doesn't mean she's numb. It means she's finally mastered control. When she stops explaining, she's not being cold. She's choosing peace over chaos. She understands that people who genuinely care will never need a long speech to understand her heart. They'll feel her sincerity in her presence, her actions, her energy. It's only the ones who benefit from her confusion that demand her endless explanations. But letting go of the habit of explaining isn't easy. It's a process that begins with pain. At first, her silence feels heavy. She feels misunderstood, unseen, maybe even guilty. She wonders if she's being unfair by pulling back. But in time, she begins to see clearly. The people who truly valued her never needed convincing. It was only those who took advantage of her empathy who thrived on her need to explain. They fed on her confusion, her kindness, her desire to fix things. And when she finally stops feeding that dynamic, she breaks the cycle. That's the power of silence. It exposes the truth without saying a word. When she no longer explains herself, she also begins to hear herself. The noise of others' opinions fades, and her intuition becomes louder. She starts trusting her gut instead of defending it. She no longer asks, "Am I overreacting?" but instead asks, "Why am I tolerating this?" That shift in question changes everything. She learns that not every disagreement deserves a response and not every insult deserves attention. Some things are beneath her energy, and she no longer feels the need to stoop down to prove otherwise. Her silence also becomes magnetic. The same people who once dismissed her start noticing her differently. They wonder why she's no longer accessible, why her energy feels distant. They mistake her peace for mystery because they no longer have access to her explanations. But she's not being mysterious. She's being intentional. She's learned that quietness carries more power than 1,000 well-chosen words. When she walks away silently, she leaves a presence that echoes louder than her voice ever could, because silence is clarity, and clarity is power. In her new quiet, she finds freedom. She stops explaining her boundaries and simply enforces them. She stops over-justifying her choices and simply lives them. She stops debating her worth and simply embodies it. And that shift doesn't just change her relationships. It changes her energy entirely. She begins attracting people who value peace the way she does, who communicate with respect, who listen with intent. Because when a woman stops explaining herself, she raises her frequency, and only those aligned with truth can exist in her presence. The woman who no longer explains herself becomes unstoppable. She doesn't chase validation because she validates herself. She doesn't argue with lies because truth stands on its own. She doesn't beg for understanding because she finally understands herself. Her silence becomes sacred, not as punishment, but as protection. Because peace isn't found in being right, it's found in being free. And when she learns that, she no longer needs the world to agree with her, she just needs her soul to rest. In the end, her silence is not the absence of words, it's the presence of wisdom. It's the realization that energy never lies, that explanations are unnecessary when truth is felt, and that the most powerful statement a woman can make is simply walking away without saying a word. Because the woman who has found peace in her silence has already said everything she needed to herself. When a woman finally believes her worth, she stops accepting almost love. There comes a time in a woman's life when she looks at herself differently. Not through the eyes of others, not through the pain of her past, but through the quiet strength she's built from surviving it all. She begins to realize that love should never feel like guessing, waiting, or begging. It should not require her to shrink herself just to be seen. And in that moment of awakening, she stops accepting almost love, the kind that almost feels real, almost gives peace, almost commits, but never truly does. The woman who once settled for crumbs finally remembers she deserves the whole meal, and that realization changes everything. For so long, she tried to make half-hearted love feel whole. She poured herself into men who loved her convenience more than her soul. She mistook attention for affection and consistency for commitment. She convinced herself that if she gave more, tried harder, and stayed longer, he would eventually love her right. But love doesn't grow in confusion, it grows in clarity. And every time she excused his distance, ignored her intuition, or accepted the bare minimum, she taught herself to survive on emotional leftovers. The truth is, she never asked for too much. She just kept asking it from people who had too little to give. There's a deep ache in realizing that almost love is actually a slow heartbreak. It doesn't shatter you all at once. It empties you quietly. It's the kind of love that keeps you hoping, while it's also breaking you. It's the one where he says all the right things, but never shows up when it matters. Where he holds your hand, but keeps his heart elsewhere. She felt it every time he promised change, but delivered the same story. Every time he said, "I care about you," but disappeared when she needed him most. It took her a while to see that inconsistency is not confusion, it's a choice. And once she accepts that, she stops romanticizing potential and starts demanding presence. When a woman begins to believe her worth, her energy changes. The same things that once impressed her no longer move her. Sweet words don't mean much when they're not backed by effort. Attention doesn't excite her when it comes from people who can't offer intention. She stops chasing connection with those who drain her peace. Because real love isn't about chaos, it's about calm. It's not found in the highs and lows of drama, but in the steady rhythm of honesty. She learns that love is not supposed to hurt, confuse, or make her question her value. And if it does, it's not love, it's attachment disguised as affection. She begins to walk differently, not arrogantly, but with quiet certainty. She's no longer waiting for someone to choose her, she's already chosen herself. That's what scares people who once took her for granted. She no longer needs them. Her validation no longer lives in their approval. The compliments that once melted her now feel empty because she's no longer starving for them. She's learned to feed herself with peace, purpose, and self-respect. Her standards stop being a request, they become a reality, and she stops explaining them, because the right person won't need them translated. But this transformation doesn't come easy. It's born from the nights she cried herself to sleep wondering why she wasn't enough. It comes from the heartbreak that shattered her illusions and the silence that forced her to heal. She had to lose herself in, almost love, to understand the kind of love she truly deserves. And once she learns that lesson, she never goes back. Because you can't unsee your worth once you've recognized it. You can't return to places that made you forget who you are. The woman who's awakened to her value no longer chases, she attracts. She no longer pleads, she decides. She no longer tolerates, she chooses peace. Now, when love comes knocking, she listens differently. She doesn't get lost in promises, she watches patterns. She doesn't mistake consistency for chemistry. She's not impressed by potential, because she's learned that potential without effort is just a dream that wastes her time. She no longer fears being alone. She fears losing herself again for someone who doesn't see her light. Her love is no longer desperate, it's deliberate. And that's the beauty of her evolution. She doesn't want perfect love. She wants real love. The kind that doesn't make her question her sanity or silence her spirit. When a woman finally believes in her worth, she redefines what love means. It's no longer about intensity or fantasy. It's about honesty, safety, and peace. She realizes that true love doesn't come to fix her, it comes to meet her. It doesn't ask her to prove anything. It just matches her energy. The woman who once begged for affection now attracts alignment, because she finally understands that what she accepts reflects what she believes she deserves. And now, she only accepts what feels right to her soul. In the end, she doesn't hate the ones who gave her almost love. She thanks them. Because they were her greatest teachers. They showed her the difference between being wanted and being valued, between being desired and being respected. They taught her that her heart is not a project, and her love is not a reward for someone's inconsistency. She forgives them, but she never forgets the lesson. And as she walks forward, calm, radiant, and self-assured, she carries that truth like armor. Because the moment a woman stops accepting almost love, she becomes unstoppable. She no longer looks for completion. She is the completion. She no longer waits to be chosen. She chooses herself. And that kind of woman, grounded in worth and fueled by self-respect, will never again settle for half of what she deserves. Because she finally knows. Real love begins the moment she decides she's enough.